Amsterdam Radio, the podcast for creatives, thinkers, and doers. It is I, the mayor, Flobo Boyce, in the mayor's office, hang with people who are doing the thing. But today, we're taking a little bit of a diversion into the world of mental health. And why is that important for creatives as they put themselves on their own journeys? Please welcome Anna to the show. Anna, how's it going?
Great. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. How's it going?
I cannot complain. It is a sweltering day in Los Angeles. I'm already sweating, but it's already fine. But you're out of Toronto, right? Or Canada?
Yeah, yes.
Is it like sticky out there? Because I was in last August. It's pretty humid.
Yeah, today we kind of have a humid, rainy, but super hot day. But again, as Canadians, we can't complain.
Right. Yeah, I've heard stories. So let's get down to the brass tacks of things. Healing Journey Retreats is the organization that you work with, but more importantly, as a creative, someone who struggles with their own creative path, their own mental health. Why is mental health so important, and why do we kind of like push it off to the side until it's too late?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, mental health is still stigmatized, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I think just even having the courage and bravery to talk about it openly is one thing to celebrate. And yeah, I think for me, mental health is kind of, I don't know, I think during my last 10 years working in the tech industry, I've gone through, multiple cycles of burnout, anxiety, depression myself. And
Mhm.
um, I've been in therapy forever. And I sometimes joke by saying that everybody needs a therapist, preferably a sign up birth, because we're just not taught, in our lives or at school or at work how to deal with our emotions and how to process them properly.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to see, nowadays it's becoming a topic that more and more people are willing to open up about. Um, so yeah, I think collectively as a world, we're kind of headed into the direction of, more self-discovery and introspection and kind of figuring out what our purpose is in life. And yeah, so I'm glad that we're kind of taking this direction.
Yeah, I call it reading the back label of ourselves, right? Like, oh, that's where I come from. Oh, that's what I believe in. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Was there a particular moment for you, though, when you were on your own recovery or your own therapy session and you decided, you know what, I can do this for others? I don't want to keep it for myself. I want to be able to share my expertise for those who may be in a similar situation.
Yeah, I think it was a slow process, and I think healing is a journey. That's why I named my business Healing Journey Retreats.
Hmm.
So I've actually been in kind of this hospitality travel industry as a side hustle for the last same decade when I was working in the tech industry. So I was an Airbnb host um, since 2011 when nobody knew what it was. So I was one of the OGs, and I had people stay with me on the couch,
Yeah.
and I would take them out and like bring them to have picnics with friends and go sailing in Lake Ontario. Um, so yeah, I think from that I was able to travel the world a little bit in my 20s, and I stayed in mostly hostels. So those are basically like hotels for young people, dorm beds, bunk rooms, sorry, dorm rooms
Right.
and bunk beds.
Right.
And then what I loved about staying at hostels as opposed to Airbnbs and hotels is that they have, you know, um, these scheduled activities every day, all hours of the day. So like free walking tours, you can go sightseeing with people that you've just met in your room, cooking dinners together, having classes, and just all kinds of activities that really bond people. So I thought, okay, like maybe I can do this. Maybe
Yeah.
I can do better than some of the hostels that I've stayed in. So for the last 5 years, I was actively working towards that dream. And then the pandemic hit.
Of course it
So
did.
I was forced to go back to the tech, 9 to 7, 8 grind. And yeah, I think part of me had to mourn the loss of this dream that I had, right? Which is kind of, yeah, just kind of creating a really friendly space, both like physically and like as mentally, spiritually for people to, join from all over the world and just have great connections.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was during, I don't know, some part of my life, after I've gotten used to the cushy job and, great boss and good pay and all this stuff, but I still felt unfulfilled. So I was like, what's wrong
Right.
with me? Like I have all these things that people would dream to have, but there's a hole in my gut. So again, talked about it with my therapist. And one day I just said, what if I can, like, if this is the mountain and, this is like the hostel at the very top, is there another trail or another route where I can reach that top, in a different way?
Sure.
So I, through this random post that I saw on Facebook, there was a nonprofit organization in Toronto that was offering a women's entrepreneurship course online for 3 months for people who struggle with mental health. And on the application form, it said, "What's your business idea?" And I put down hostel for depressed people.
Wow, I think you oversold
Not even politically correct. But at the time, I was thinking, okay, like, sometimes, often, like, I travel to kind of escape from my own routine and the daily grind. So I thought, okay, what if I could go somewhere where I'm sometimes pushed to talk to people, but sometimes, still allow myself to be in my room and cry and not be judged. So I thought about, okay, well, what about mental health retreats? And, then I talked with my therapist and she said, you have no idea how many therapists would love to do something like this.
Right.
So I was like, okay. So then, 6 months later, she introduced me to two of her colleagues who are both psychologists. And I'm actually doing one retreat with one of them in Tulum in Mexico this January.
Yeah.
So I think it's taken a natural pivot from hostels, and now at this age in life, I'm also like not too sure if I can handle 18-year-old drunk people coming home into the door. So like, okay, and I think with mental health, again, just having gone through personal struggles with it, I'm feeling like, I can curate a travel experience that has the right balance of, let's say, learning about the brain and knowing ourselves and how our emotions work, but also still have fun and, supportive activities like snorkeling with turtles and like going to the beach. And so,
Yeah.
I think now I get to, curate travel experiences for people who struggle with mental health. And I think it's just a more purposeful thing to do at this point in my life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I'm able to travel a little bit more myself, I realize how great it is. Well, because for me, it was the means of going out and traveling was one thing, but then I also didn't want to come back and be that guy, be like, when I was in Rome last week or whatever. But there is a very cool thing about having new experiences. So I have a bit of a two-part question for you. I know launching a
Yeah.
business must be very, very exciting. You're like, I can do this, but there had to have been some haters in the streets, right? Being like, I don't know if you should be doing that. I don't know what the things are. What was like that for you, and how'd you overcome that?
Yeah. So when I first started fleshing out the business, I wanted to do some market research and see, okay, like, is this even what people want? So I actually went on Reddit, and I've never been on Reddit in my life. And Reddit is a different ballgame than
It's the
any
Wild West,
social
yeah.
media platforms I've been on. So I just posted something like, what are people thinking of, like, a mental health retreat geared towards a more science-based, evidence-based approach, led by therapists and psychologists, versus something that's like a wellness retreat focused on spa, relaxation, and spirituality. And I just put that out there as a feeler, and I think I have, I don't know, hundreds of comments and
That's good.
most of them aren't positive. I don't know. I think it was very like half and half. So the
That's
ones that
good.
got
Yeah.
upvoted, people were definitely thinking, like, saying things like, no, this is, definitely for like rich people, and like, I would never want one. And I was like, whoa, okay. But at the same time, I still had a lot of people who were super nice, and they DM'd me and shared their life stories with me with their struggles with mental health. And I think, sometimes I feel like, okay, and actually there's this one lady who connected with me afterwards via email, and she just told me about her whole story and struggles with mental health and IVF, and
Oh,
which is, one struggle that I can't imagine how tough it would be. And I was just like tearing up reading her email. She's sending me photos with her baby, after she was able to conceive. And she said, when I saw your post, I just felt like here is someone who is trying to do something good for the world
Sure.
and trying to do something meaningful, and who is so open to, share the vulnerability in like a healing journey. And so she's like, I just jumped right in and I told you, she wrote to me on Reddit, like, forget all these haters, like,
Yeah, yeah.
they're everywhere. And yeah, like, you just have to focus on your why and what you're doing. And so I feel like the fact that she and a few others who have been so kind to me, in sharing their journeys, I feel like, okay, wow, like this is something that I will, take a leap and see where it goes. So yeah, I mean, there's always haters, and I think when you put yourself out there as an entrepreneur,
Right.
you are opening yourself to judgment, to potential, failure, I think. And I think, yeah, like when other people come to you and say like, oh, that's never going to work, and like, you're crazy for trying to do something like this, we don't need something like this in the world. You just have to see, okay, well, I can't fix all the world's issues, but here's what I am, in control of, and so I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the cool things about reading a bit about your company and your retreat saying they're grounded in science, I've never seen that approach before. Now, I know everything you can't share because it's proprietary, but what does that mean if someone's like, what do you mean by rooted in science? What do you mean neuroscience-based wellness? What does that look like?
Yeah, so when I Googled mental health retreats during my own dark days, I think I found a lot of yoga retreats, meditation retreats, spirituality retreats. And then on the other end, there were a lot of rehab centers for people with severe mental illnesses where you have to stay on for a few months. And I thought, okay, so there's not really anything in between where it's just for kind of everyday people, professionals, entrepreneurs. Um, People who kind of do want something practical, and let's say guided by certified professionals. And I think so. I myself have gone on, a yoga teacher training retreat and a couple of meditation retreats, and then there are all kinds of, healing retreats with like crystals and sage and all that stuff. And I think when we go into the vulnerable world of mental health and mental wellness, definitely emotions will come up. And I think, just because I myself have gone through depression and anxiety, I don't feel like I'm qualified to just like lead people in a group session and say, okay, now we're gonna, dive into these kind of topics. So I feel like partnering with therapists and psychologists is something I really believe in, and they have decades of experience and they're trained, they went to school for this, right? So they're
Right.
there to kind of hold us in the safe space for us to explore, our emotions. So
Yeah.
I think that's why, I guess that's like one differentiator for that. And yeah, like I do have a background in neuroscience, and when I was going through my own struggles, it was definitely helpful to know, like, okay, this is how the brain works. This is why I'm depressed. This is why I feel anxious. But I think mental health, is just like fitness. It's not one thing that gets you to wellness. It's like multiple pillars that
Sure.
uphold you. So I think, for fitness, for example, you have to go to the gym or some sort of movement, and you also have to eat well and sleep well. So there's different parts of that gets you well. And same with mental health. You can go to therapy, and you can, try something that's involving movement, like let's say yoga or any sort of fitness dance, really helps for me too. And I think journaling, right? Things like introspection, meditation, for some people it's gardening. So from, like, it's really kind of finding your own pillars of what works for you, and then say, okay, well, I've tried that hasn't really worked for me, and I'm going to try something else. And I think at this retreat, we're going to be offering, different kinds of therapeutic modalities for people to explore. And because it's going to take place in Mexico and in Tulum, there's this vast, energy of healing, and the jungle and the ocean nearby. And there are a lot of local modalities too, like there's a Temazcal ceremony, and cacao ceremony, where it's kind of like, these ancient methods that have been around that people are looking into and kind of looking back into. And there are so many things that science can't explain, right? So
Sure.
it's not to say like we shun spirituality and we don't do any of that. I became a yoga teacher earlier this February, so I'll be teaching yoga there. And I think yoga has also come a long way, right? Before it was very woo-woo, and now it's like super, common for everybody to explore. So yeah, I think there is so much room between spirituality and science, and this is kind of that Venn diagram in the middle. Like I think I saw somebody say like, oh, people think like spirituality and science is like chocolate and vanilla, that there's nothing in between, but there's so much in between.
Sure.
So yeah.
So actually, that was my next question. I was like, why Tulum? But that was perfectly succinctly said why Tulum would be the point for the retreat in January, starting January 7th. But talk to me about
Yeah.
the undertaking, though, putting things together, making sure the local governments know you're coming, getting people on board to show up. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, what's that been like on the back end, making sure everything runs as smooth as possible?
Yeah, I would say actually, so first of all, Tulum, there is another backstory to Tulum. So I spent 3 months in Tulum last winter. Again, being a Canadian, I was like, let me get the out of here. I can do, November, December, heading into Christmas spirit, holiday spirit. I'm like, okay, this is cute, for snowfall, all that. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I can't do 6 more months of this slush and gray. So yeah, and at the time I was
I
able
get it.
to, work remotely. So again, that's the one thing that came out of the pandemic that is good for humanity, is being able to work remotely. So I think coming out of the airport in Mexico, in Cancun, I just felt like the sun on my face and the warm air, and just seeing like jungle green, like trees and flowers blossoming in different colors. I felt like my anxiety was flying away by like 50%.
Oh, wow.
I think just being in that nourishing environment was just super healing for me. And I think it was from there that I actually started to, I guess, brew this idea, from a dream into reality. So, yeah. So then on your next question about like putting it all together, it's crazy again, like when in the universe one door closes, another opens. So I actually got laid off just before
Oh,
Christmas from my
sorry
tech
to hear.
job. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, and I think definitely that was just a shock to the system at first, but then I was like, okay, you know what, let's just have this as the new year and a problem, like to figure this out. So like I said, I was having my own therapy sessions with my therapist, and she was kind of talking about this idea of like, how other therapists would be really open to hosting and facilitating retreats, and maybe they don't have the capacity to, do all the legwork and the logistics of setting one up, but they have all the expertise, and it's kind of like just show up and be like, okay, here's my knowledge, right? And so I have, again, like all the experience in setting things together, like curating travel experiences through my Airbnb hosting days, and obviously like professional experiences being a product manager of putting things together. The co-facilitator that I'm working with for the Tulum retreat, she was also actually physically in Mexico at the time, and she stays in this small town that's just 10 minutes away from Tulum called Acumel. And in the Mayan language, it means the place for turtles. So in the ocean there, that's just where turtles hang out and breed and naturally
Nice.
exist.
Yeah.
So she was biking on her bike in the jungle one day, and she saw a sign that said, retreat center. And so after her and I talked for the first time, we just felt super aligned with each other. We both claim to have resting bitch face, which means when we don't talk or smile, we look like we're gonna kill somebody. But we're just really genuine and blunt people. So anyway, we connected right away. And when I was telling her about the vision of what I had, and I kind of sent her a couple of, like not vision boards, but like images of places that I was thinking of, she said, is this what you're thinking of? And when I looked up the retreat venue online, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So even though in the end I looked at 10 other venues, I still went with this first one because it just felt, perfect. Like they're nestled in the jungle. They're basically like tree houses. They call them casas. And it's a
Okay.
very kind of small, intimate place. I think max there are 4 bedrooms per casa, and there are only 4 or 5 casas on the compound. So, and they only do retreats. So I feel like, okay, this is kind of, the stars are aligned. Yeah, and so yeah, I think putting together like the program is also, I would say, like, as someone who again have gone through mental health challenges, you want to curate an experience that is, has the right balance of doing work on yourself and then rewarding yourself with fun things, right? So for us, a sample schedule is like basically you wake up, we could do some yoga and stretching, we have breakfast, and then we have, a sharing circle, checking with everybody how we're doing, and then we have a workshop led by the therapist on, let's say, topic on brain and hormones and stress and how that affects our body, and other modalities like introducing EMDR and tapping and things like that. And then maybe there's a workshop on, say, practicing how to have conversations with your loved and with your loved ones. Like, because for example, for someone who's struggling with mental health,
Mhm.
our loved ones sometimes would say, just focus on the positive. Just look on the bright side, and that's not quite helpful, but it's not their fault,
Right.
right? Because no one's ever taught them what to say that's actually helpful for someone who is struggling. So having that almost like script or talking point with your loved ones to say, hey, these are the things that would really help me, and here are things why, and then you actually practice that script, let's say in a pair in front of the supportive group, and say, okay, this is how I'm going to have this conversation, and these are the ways that the conversation could go, but you're prepared and you're practicing how to have those conversations, so that when you leave the retreat and go back home, you are actually prepared to face all kinds of things that are in real life.
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah.
Just think happy thoughts. It'd be fine. Well, why not? To learn more about the retreat in January, you log on to thehealingjourneyretreats.com/Mexico-retreat for more information. And well, I've never done a retreat myself. Just hearing you talking about your approach to
You
it may
should
be kind
come.
of fun.
We love to
Well,
have you.
maybe this is like market. This is like a focus group. I always shied away for a lot of reasons. One, there was that part that you were saying about like, man, I'm from Brooklyn. I live in LA. I tried looking at charged crystals. I tried cacao and chocolate and thinking, but it doesn't really hit me the way it hits other people. I don't want to quote unquote waste the money, right? But I like the fact you're saying, look, we understand that. And there's a whole spectrum to appreciate that and to maybe find your own a path to mental balance, which is pretty cool. So that's why I wanted to chat with you about that.
Yeah.
But here on New Amsterdam Radio, we ask all our people some fun questions here. I want to make sure if you're down to play just a little bit, so people get to know
Yeah.
the real you. So I always say, as an entrepreneur, we work all the time. Do you believe in days off? And if so, what do you do on a day off?
Oh, this is so tough. So because I just started my business a few months ago,
Yeah.
I actually attended this event called Permission to Pause. And, I thought, okay, first of all, this is really aligned with my business, because basically going on mental health retreat is to pause and, do some work on yourself while relaxing and recharging for the new year. But yeah, for me, I feel like I don't give myself permission to pause because I
Sure.
feel like I haven't made it yet. Like when I first launched the website, everyone, friends and family, acquaintances, people on social media were like, congrats, like so great, you're doing this thing, amazing. And then I was like, okay, thanks, but I now have to sell it, and I was feeling like I can't really celebrate any small milestones until I've done the thing. So for example, I'm also hosting webinars that feature the therapists and psychologists to give talks on mental health, kind of like an introduction to what she or they will be teaching. So then when I did my first webinar, which was extremely, I don't know, uncomfortable and scary for me because I'm not really like a salesy person. I think I was like sweating profusely during the
Right.
recording, but anyway, afterwards everyone's like, oh my god, you did it. And then you should really be proud of yourself, and now you can like go and like take a break. And I was like, no, I will take a break when the retreat is done on January the 20th, like on January the 14th. I'll celebrate when it has finished and it's taken place. And it was a
Right.
huge success. So I think there's been a lot of personal, maybe limiting beliefs I've had to confront, like perfectionism,
Sure.
is a huge one. And, money mindset, like how much do
Hmm.
I charge for the retreat? Because you coming from a very humble background, I feel like, oh, who would pay $1,000s to like work on themselves? But you never know. Where people also
Sure.
get depressed. Um, but there's just been so many things I've had to, you know, look into kind of that's been mirrored from this entrepreneurial journey. So I feel like there's sometimes it needs to be another like Instagram or TikTok that's called like the journey of the healing journey retreat to share like
Yeah.
the behind the scenes
Yeah.
because it is so tough. And I am still learning to, reward myself with little milestones that I've achieved. And I think I have to practice what I preach because otherwise it's really ironic to be a founder of a mental health business who also struggles with mental health sometimes, but having to maybe just not set an example, but really just to practice what I preach.
Well, that's my
Yeah.
next question. How do you celebrate your wins?
Oh, that's a great question. I
Yeah.
haven't yet.
What?
I haven't celebrated anything yet.
Boo!
I
Yes,
feel
yes.
like, yeah, it's so hard when it's so hard because when let's say you're talking to a friend, right, and then they do something amazing, you're like, go like here's all the things that you deserve. But when it's you yourself, you're like, oh, I don't deserve that yet.
Right.
Um, so it's definitely a challenge. I haven't figured it out yet. I think sometimes, I'm just trying to focus like on the day to day, putting again like my own pillars back up. Let's say like going to therapy regularly, right? Doing yoga, journaling, and doing these support groups and women's circles, and whatever else that's helped me, during my dark days. Because I feel like I am someone who is susceptible to depression and anxiety, so I have to be even extra careful about how to not burn myself out. I burned myself out working for other people many times in the last decade, so sometimes I feel like, oh, why not work as hard, for me, for my
Right.
dream, for this baby that I'm putting out into the world. But yeah, it's definitely really hard. I think it's a thing that just requires constant practice.
Yeah.
There's no shortcut, there's no magic bullet that just is like, okay, one day I'm gonna be not stressed and everything's normal. Um, it's just
Right.
like like even if you're fit, if you're someone who is super fit, you still have to go to the gym, very often. You still have to eat healthy. You still have to upkeep everything that you've earned. So I think with mental health is the same thing. It's not like just going to therapy is going to help, or just doing meditation, or just doing this one thing. I think it's like a holistic approach. And again, you have to find what works for you. Um, Maybe for other people, they can celebrate, in different ways, and then it's like their thing. But for me, again, I'm still figuring that out. It
Yeah.
is a journey.
Yeah.
Healing is a journey.
Absolutely. I have one more for you, and it's the toughest question we ask anybody on the show. So, what would you say is your favorite junk food?
Oh, chips and cake. Ooh, cake. I have a soft spot for cake.
Cake, cake. What's your favorite
There's
cake?
been, yeah, I don't know, just like red velvet. It doesn't matter. Like
Ooh,
sometimes I just buy a whole cake for myself and there's for no reason. Like, not anybody's birthday. It's not anything. It's just like
that's celebrating a win, I say. And you buy yourself a
time
cake
to
there,
eat
you're
a
like,
whole
yo, it's
cake for
Thursday.
no
Hey.
reason. Maybe I'll bring that back.
Yeah, why
One
not?
of my pillars.
I just want to
Yeah.
say, Anna, thanks so much for being on the show. New Amsterdam, the podcast for creatives. Now, here's the fun part. If someone wants to engage with you, learn more about the retreat and you as an individual or entrepreneur, how they go about doing that.
Yeah, they can connect with me on Instagram at Healing Journey Retreats. And yeah, just feel free to message me. I can talk about mental health all day, every day, and travel. I think there was this meme that I saw that was just so resonated with. Like, there was a guy that says like, "Oh, I'm so burnt out. I really need to go on vacation." And he's like on the beach, and he's like, "Actually, I needed therapy." And I was like, "What if you could do both?"
Right. Why not?
Anyway.